The stars were never silent, not since. Humanity cracked faster than light. Travel and got a seat at the Galactic table. For 30 years, Earth had been the loudest voice in every room, until it wasn't. At first, the silence was blamed on system interference. Earth had shut off every galactic communication node. Without warning, no pings, no response. No acknowledgement of council votes, security threats, or diplomatic requests, not even a polite refusal. Just dead air. They called it an error. Then a phase, then an insult, then a threat. For 2 galactic years, Earth didn't respond to anything, not even the border skirmish in Sector 7, where human colonies were burned by rogue to carry ships, not even when the High Chancellor of the Grand Conglomerate declared human silence an act of rebellion. The Council begged for a meeting. They sent envoys, threatened sanctions, blocked trade, froze Earth out of diplomatic and economic routes. One by one, the galactic alliances turned their backs on the species that once helped end the Tormic Wars, stabilize wormhole trade routes, and write half the galactic charter. Earth didn't blink, it just vanished from the conversation. For Commander Reed Dalton, a veteran of the Saturn conflict and one of the few human officers still stationed in neutral territory, the silence wasn't just strange, it was insulting. They've abandoned everything we built, Reed muttered, staring out at the void through the view deck of the Serapis station. The treaties, the blood, we spilled all of it. Maybe they're done talking, said Vaughn, a Zarn diplomat with 5 tentacles and half a mouth. Your kind always had a reputation for impatience. No, Reed said, jaw tightening. That's not impatience. That's planning. He didn't know how right he was. On the 743rd day of Earth's silence, it answered, no message, no speech, just warships. 1,000 of them, cloaked in black titanium, surrounded the galactic core, orbiting the central planet of Prime. Like predators circling prey, they didn't fire, they didn't hail, they just arrived. Every council race, Zarn, Tekari, Velm, Froth, Salari, watched in horror as human-made destroyers, dreadnoughts, and new classes of ships the galaxy had never seen before emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Not a single one out of line. It wasn't an invasion. It was a statement. Reed stood in the observation room of the station, eyes locked on the fleet that hung above the capital like a black cloud of judgment. His comms lit up. Dozens of channels, one transmission, repeated over and over again from every warship, one sentence: humanity declines. Further discussion. That was it. No demands, no ultimatums. Just a final cold refusal and a show of force the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. Why now? Vin stammered, trembling in a way Reed had never seen before. Why not respond to our peace calls? Why not negotiate? Reed didn't answer because he remembered something Earth never forgot. The colony on Bastion 3, over 200,000 human civilians burned alive when the Tekari fleet accidentally fired during what they claimed was a military exercise. The Council ruled it a tragic miscalculation. No reparations, no punishment, no justice. Earth had buried its dead in silence. But it didn't forget. Reed clenched his fists as the warships held their position, 1,000 eyes staring down the arrogance of a universe that thought Earth could be silenced. Bullied or bought, they thought silence was surrender. They were wrong. The lead Destroyer moved. Just slightly. Not toward the planet, toward the Council's own orbital fleet, and then, one by one, the lights of every alien vessel in orbit flickered, then dimmed, then died, impulses targeted. Precision tech Earth never shared. In 10 seconds, the galaxy's most powerful armada was blind and drifting. Humanity's ship still lit, still watching, still waiting. Ree finally spoke, his voice low. They gave peace, they gave time, and when no one listened, they gave warning. Vin turned to him, panic rising. What happens now? Ree didn't blink. Now the galaxy learns what silence caused. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council was in full emergency session, not for an interstellar plague, not for a collapsed wormhole, but because Earth had finally spoken, and it had done so without a single word. Inside the high conclave hall of Valerian Prime, chaos reigned. Dozens of species barked in a dozen languages, translators struggling to keep up with the accusations, the panic, and the demand for answers. They have crippled our fleet without firing a shot. Why didn't we prepare for this? Where were your spies in Sol system? Where were your satellites? The Velmian Prime delegate slammed his six-fingered hand against the podium. This is a declaration of war. The humans must be sanctioned to extinction. They already sanctioned us, a voice said from the shadows of the chamber, quiet but cutting. Every eye turned. Rehearsed. Dalton stepped into the room, still wearing the gray and black of the Terran auxiliary fleet, though he hadn't been an active officer in over a year. His badge had been revoked when Earth fell. Silent, yet here he was, walking into the most protected hall in the galaxy. Like he still owned a seat. Guards moved forward. He raised one hand. A small disc floated from his palm. Terran tech. Unauthorized, unregistered. It played. Projection Bastion 3. The footage was raw, untouched, and time-stamped. A Takari ship's misfire, then another. The orbital cannon aimed directly at the human colony, blinking to life. The sound of confused chatter, panic. Evacuation orders, then static, then fire, then screaming. Reese let it play for exactly 38 seconds. Before cutting it, that's what Earth responded to. That's what you all ignored. That's why we stopped showing up to your meetings and playing diplomat. You dare threaten us with military intimidation, shouted the H-Roth representative, his eyes burning bright red with rage. Reese's voice was level. No, we're done threatening. This is the part where we collect. Up above, the 1,000 Terran ships held their silence. Their engines were idle, their weapons cold, but the effect was more terrifying than an open barrage. Every scan sent by alien ships was blocked or looped. Every frequency jammed. It wasn't warfare, it was domination. The High Chancellor's personal fleet was the first to panic. The Salari dreadnought, imminent flame, tried to break orbit, turning its belly to the nearest Terran warship and firing a warning shot, a low-yield plasma blast. Meant to deter, it never landed. A small Terran corvette, no bigger than a civilian freighter, fired once. A red beam of pure kinetic compression sliced through the imminent flame like it was tissue paper. No explosion, no fire. Just a clean cut from bow to stern. Two halves drifted in space. No one else fired. Inside the council chamber, several envoys stood frozen in fear. Their species' pride no match for the dread hanging over them. Re looked toward the central days. Earth came to every meeting for 30 years. We gave technology, we sent soldiers, we signed your treaties, fought in your wars, shared our medical advances, even saved your dying systems. We sat at your table, he leaned forward. And when we lost Bastion 3, you gave us your silence. No one authorized that attack. Takari delegate cried out, his skin twitching. That was a rogue fleet. We disavowed 2 years, Ree said. You had 2 years to punish them. You gave us apologies. You let the commanders walk free. You blamed weather anomalies for orbital errors. We were told Earth forgave. Forgiveness, Ree interrupted, was your last mistake. Back on the Terran flagship Leviathan, Admiral Keen stood at the helm. He was not young, not anymore. Silver-streaked. His hair and a long scar ran down the side of his face, a reminder of the day he pulled 5 survivors from the ashes of Bastion 3's capital, a fire that should have killed him too. He never asked for this role, but when Earth decided to answer the galaxy, they asked for him. Status, he asked, his voice quiet. Fleet in full formation. No losses. Orbital command reports no movement from remaining alien vessels. Good. The bridge was silent. Professional. These weren't fresh cadets. Every man and woman aboard had seen war, real war. Not the political skirmishes the Council called conflict management. This was something else. Begin transmission, Keen said. The comms officer nodded and Earth's message finally played across the galaxy. No diplomats, no politicians. Just images. The first screen showed human colonies abandoned, medical shipments blocked, trade embargoes enforced, videos of alien ships turning away desperate Terran relief vessels, then the bodies burned out, cities, graves on Mars, memorials on Titan. The next screen showed Earth's new fleet, quiet, efficient, deadly. The final message blinked onto every Council terminal. Humanity no longer requests a seat at the table. We are the table. You chose silence. Now listen to ours. On the Council floor, the arguing had stopped. For the first time, the room was quiet. Even the Velmian Prime delegate, always first to speak, last to yield, was silent, returned, not waiting for permission. He walked out, a free man, a Terran, with the entire galaxy staring at his back. In a dark chamber buried beneath the capital city, 5 council races met in secret, not the diplomats, the real powers, the shadow caste, the ones who ran empires behind curtains and noble bloodlines. They watched the Terran fleet in orbit. They did the math. This isn't just revenge, one whispered. This is doctrine. They've rewritten the rules. They could take the capital. They could take everything. No, said the Hoth warlord. They don't want our planets. They want our fear, and they've earned it. Meanwhile, Earth remained quiet. No formal declaration of war, no landing fleets, no invasion, because it didn't need one. Its warships remained orbiting the Council capital like gods of judgment. The message was simple. We see you, we remember, we are no longer your subordinate. Across the galaxy, human colonies celebrated. Cities on Mars, Ganymede, Europa erupted into cheers. For the first time in decades, Earth wasn't defending itself, it was on the offensive. Back on the Leviathan, Admiral Keen stood in his command chamber, hands behind his back. He watched the planet spin slowly beneath them. He remembered the early years when humanity was laughed at in council. Meetings when they were called. Emotional, primitive, reactionary. They weren't wrong, but they weren't ready either. Now they were. Sir, a young officer said, approaching. With a data pad, Council is requesting an emergency peace summit there, offering to rescind all trade sanctions. Takari fleet commanders placed under arrest. Keene didn't look away from the view. Denied. Sir, no summit, no meetings, let them sweat. The officer hesitated, and the fleet hold position. 3 days passed, still no response. From Earth beyond the orbiting warships. The Council fractured, old alliances crumbled, the Velm threatened the Salari. For prior deals with Terrante, the Takari demanded amnesty for cooperation. The Atroth began mobilizing old war fleets not against Earth but against each other, fearing what Terran support would mean in a future war. Earth had done nothing, just hovered, and in their silence they had undone 500 years of galactic politics. On the 6th day, Ree stood alone on a ridge overlooking the fields of Valerian. He held a small glass chip between his fingers, a relic, the only thing left from his brother's outpost on Bastion 3. Burned into it were 4 seconds of video, his brother smiling, waving, the sound of children playing behind him, the last moment before the Takari burned them alive. Justice, a voice asked behind him. It was Keene. Ree shook his head. Closure. You think this gave it to you? Ree tucked the chip away. No, but it gave them something worse. Keene waited. Fear, Ree said. We don't need to kill them, we just needed them to know we could. And they did, because Earth no longer shouted in meetings. It didn't plead or negotiate. It simply arrived with 1,000 warships and let the silence do the rest. It started with whispers, not among diplomats or leaders, but among soldiers. Takari war fleets in the outer sectors reported strange disappearances. Patrol units entering Terran patrolled. Space went dark, supply lines to outer colonies collapsed without warning. Convoys vanished without wreckage. Without distress calls, the Council called them isolated anomalies. But the soldiers called them what they were: ghost strikes. Earth wasn't attacking, it was erasing. Back on Leviathan, Admiral Keene watched as the latest status updates trickled in. Everyone tagged with the same Terran call sign, Black Echo, no official confirmation, no broadcast, just wiped fleets and orbital bases with the mark of human precision. He stared at the report, jaw tight, hands behind his back. His officer stood quiet, trained not to ask questions. Finally he spoke. Signal Ree. Ree was stationed planet side now, temporarily assigned as Earth's lone diplomatic liaison, a title that meant nothing. His real job was simple: watch, listen, and report every Council move. He sat in a low corner of an iron bar, alone, nursing a thick glass of smoked gin, the kind made from tan junipers. Bitter, earthy, and sharp, his calm clicked twice, a secure channel blinking to life in his left ear. Ree. Keene replied quietly. The Takari outer fleet is gone, entire sector blind, no response, no beacons, no debris. They got warned, I didn't authorize it. Ree sipped his drink. Doesn't mean it wasn't us. Keene was silent for a moment. This wasn't about war. We wanted to scare them, force respect, keep them thinking. They are thinking, Ree said. They're thinking about every Terran they stepped over, every Council vote they laughed us out of, every time they turned off the Channel when Earth spoke, now they're listening with their blood. You sure about this path? Keen asked. I'm not walking it, Ree replied. We all are together. In a back room far beneath the council. Spire the Solarian Velm met in. Secret, they'd seen the writing on the wall. Earth was no longer a player, it was a dealer. We cannot allow this, hissed Velm Chancellor War. They've broken every treaty. Solari Envoy Sendral nodded. They dismantled our blockade in silence, dismantled Takari fleets without a formal shot. The longer we wait, the weaker we become. What do you propose? An alliance, Droll whispered. One last unity. Not of politics, but of survival. Velm narrowed his eyes. You want to fight them? I want to remind them they are not gods. Ree knew about the meeting before they left the chamber. Terran intelligence had eyes in every shadow now. The moment you spoke Earth's name in anger, they were already watching. He stood in the street, rain soaking. Through his jacket, he watched the clouds above flash with the faint outlines of orbiting warships. They were always visible now on purpose. The rain didn't bother him. In fact, he liked it, reminded him of the old world. He turned as a figure approached. Council security, rank stripes glowing with authority. You're to come with me, the officer said. Reese didn't move. Am I under arrest? No, sir. Then I'm staying in the rain. A pause, then the officer's expression changed slightly. Sir, something's coming. They're not calling it war, but it's close. High Council's mobilizing hidden reserves, unauthorized planetary weapons have gone live. Ree looked up at the sky again. You ever wonder, he said, why Earth stopped talking? The officer hesitated. Yes, because they got tired of explaining themselves to people who didn't listen. Back on Leviathan, the command room buzzed with rising tension. Solari defense grid is hot. Velm satellite defense systems realigned for full spectrum engagement. Dozens of new signal traces detected in outer rim stations. Preparations for an assault. One officer asked. No, not yet. They're posturing, trying to bluff Earth into backing down. Keen chuckled low and bitter. Back down to what? The same table that voted to let our colonies burn. The same backroom halls that traded Earth for minerals and quiet borders. He stepped forward, voice calm and deliberate. Ready weapons, don't fire, let them see. We're watching, we'll let them take the first swing. They did, exactly 9 days after Earth's fleet arrived. A Velm exploratory cruiser crossed into the asteroid corridor of Sector 4 territory. Earth had claimed post-silence, no warning, no permit. It didn't last long. A single Terran ghost ship no larger than a scout frigate shadowed it. Cloaked, then at the edge of a dying star, it fired a kinetic slug that passed through the Velm ship's engines. Core and bridge in a straight line. 3 seconds, no survivors, but Earth didn't claim responsibility, not officially, because it didn't need to. The Council called it an unfortunate accident. Their own soldiers knew better. Whispers turned to fear. Ree stood in a vast, cathedral-like corridor, part of the Terran embassy, rebuilt though Earth never formally opened it again. Keen stood opposite him, both men quiet for a moment before either spoke. They think we're bluffing, Ree said. They always have, Keen replied. They thought we were bluffing when we joined the war against the Tormach. They thought we were bluffing when we terraformed the moons. They said we're dead when we built wormholes they couldn't replicate, when We offered peace. Ree nodded, and now they think we're bluffing with 1,000 warships hanging over their heads. They'll fire soon, Keen said. It'll be small, measured. They'll target something non-lethal, just enough to say you don't own us. And then what? Keen looked at him, eyes cold. Then we stopped pretending we came here to negotiate. The shot came on day 10, a precision strike against a Terran outpost on the far side of Valerian's moon. No casualties, but a message. The Council's official release called it a tactical warning, a suggestion to Earth that escalation could be avoided if reasonable behavior resumed. That was their mistake. They still thought Earth wanted to be reasonable. Keen didn't call the Council, didn't request talks, didn't return messages. He just turned to his tactical chief and said, target the Velm orbital platform. Disarm it, leave the husk. The fleet moved, 5 Terran ships detached from formation. No bright explosions, no chaos, just light, focused, intelligent. Light that reduced centuries of Velm military infrastructure into debris. Piece by clean piece. It took 11 minutes. The Council never responded because there was nothing left to say. Panic gripped the galaxy, not because Earth attacked, but because it knew exactly what not to destroy. No civilians, no cultural landmarks, no mass bloodshed, just precision warfare designed to humiliate and disarm. It was vengeance with a surgeon's hand, and that terrified them more than rage. Back on the surface, Ree walked through a marketplace. Everyone avoided him, not because of his badge or his face, but because of his shadow. He was Terran. Now that meant something. He passed an old Roth veteran sitting against a broken wall, staring up at the sky where Earth ships still glowed in the clouds. The old soldier didn't move, just muttered. They came without speeches, like gods with memories. Ree paused, looked down at him. We're not gods, he said quietly. We are the remainder. Inside the Terran embassy, a single message blinked on Keen's private console from Earth. Simple, stark. Council mobilizing super weapons. Confirm response authority. Keen stared at it, then pressed one button. Authorized. And Earth, silent for 2 years now, spoke again, not through diplomats, not through threats, but through action. Fleet maneuvers accelerated. New warships uncloaked from orbit. Old allies came out of hiding. Rogue human mercenaries from the fringe colonies. Outcasts, scavengers, even pirates, all reactivated by the Terran Defense Initiative. They were never lawless. They were waiting, and Earth had just whispered. Now galactic order was cracking. Council couldn't hold. The people no longer believed in their promises. Every speech was drowned out by the silent presence of 1,000 Terran warships. And across 1,000,000 systems, one truth took hold. Earth had stopped asking for peace. Now it demanded memory, and soon submission. The galaxy was spinning out of balance. Not from war, at least not yet, but from fear. Worlds once proud and defiant were now filled with hushed conversations. Darkened council halls and ships that turned their transponders off when they passed near anything flying Terran. Metal. Markets stumbled, trade routes shifted. Even criminals stopped hijacking human freighters because no one wanted to find out what happened when Earth stopped being merciful. Ree walked through the grand plaza of Yan Prime, boots clicking on polished stone, shoulders squared, eyes scanning every alley and window. The locals didn't look at him, not anymore. They looked away, heads bowed. Like conquered peasants, pretending the new emperor wasn't watching. He wasn't. In uniform, he didn't need it. The mere presence of a Terran male was enough. Now you didn't question his clearance. You didn't ask who sent him, you just moved. At a quiet corner cafe, he spotted the contact, lean, twitchy, dressed like a courier, but his eyes were too alert. Two. Takari, military class and nervous. Good. Ree sat down across from him without a word. Let the silence settle. After a few seconds, the Takari leaned forward. They're building a kill net, he said. Quickly, 3 systems wide, coordinated by a Solari AI. They think if they catch the fleet spread out enough, they can deliver a decapitation strike. Ree stirred the coffee in front of him. Didn't drink, just move the spoon. Slowly. Do you know what happened to your last admiral who tried a decapitation strike? The Takari swallowed. We know. Then why the hell are you still trying? The courier's voice dropped. Because Earth isn't supposed to win like this. You're not supposed to be silent. You're supposed to fight, shout, demand, bleed. Ree smiled faintly. That's the problem. You all thought our anger was noise. You never saw what it looked like when it went quiet. He stood. Run back to your masters. Tell them we're not looking for war, but we remember. Back aboard Leviathan, the situation was shifting. Admiral Keen stood over a hollow map of the Yaren system. Red dots blinked where Terran ships held orbit. Yellow flared from the edges. New movements, too many. They're positioning for a mass strike, said Commander Walsh. His exo, at least 70 ships entering fringe space. Unfull flagged, but heat profiles match council models. Velm or Salari, both. Joint op from the looks of it. Could be a mixed fleet. Heavy carriers, long range artillery, not a suicide run. They want to end this cleanly. Take out command, scatter the rest. Keen didn't flinch. They still think we're like them, afraid to go too far. Should we respond? Not yet. Walsh hesitated. They're targeting you, sir. Keen looked up from the hollow map. They should be. The joint fleet didn't announce itself. It didn't declare war. It just entered orbit from the far side of second moon. Power signatures masked, weapons charged, engines whisper quiet. Every warship had one target, Leviathan. Theory was simple. Take out the Terran command ship, and the rest of the fleet would fall back or hesitate or even go rogue without leadership. They didn't realize Keen wasn't the one in charge anymore. The moment the first of the council ships crossed the invisible boundary Earth had drawn, hidden Terran systems went hot. Satellites burst to life. Dozens of stealth drones uncloaked. Orbital mines ignited and carved through half a dozen cruisers before alarms even registered on council bridges. Then Leviathan spun 90 degrees, not retreating, not shielding, charging. Ree stood on the observation deck of the embassy, watching as lights flickered above the clouds. Council ships screamed as they tried to reposition, but Earth's fleet didn't fight like the others. It didn't form neat walls or classic formations. It flowed. Ships darted, danced, and struck with brutal accuracy. War forged not from tradition, but from raw survival. The joint fleet was shredded within minutes. The Salari battleship Vex, ardent, the pride of its armada, was cut in half by 2 Terran interceptors, coordinating a pincer strike from opposite angles. The Velm command ship tried to retreat and was pulled out of warp by an Earth-built grav catch. technology the Council hadn't even seen before. By the time the skirmish ended, 22 Council vessels were disabled, destroyed or adrift. 0 Terran losses. Ree exhaled slowly and tapped his comm. Keen. Hear you okay? A pause. Better than they are. Ray's glanced toward the sky again. They're going to spin this, call it defense, blame radicals, try to downplay the loss. Let them. You want me to say anything official? No. Keen said, let the wreckage speak for itself. Across the galaxy, shock waves hit. Markets collapsed, military officials resigned, protests erupted on neutral planets, accusing the Council of provoking an unnecessary conflict with a species that clearly held superiority. Now not just in weapons but in tactics. Young officers in Council meetings began defecting, some out of fear, others out of respect. One message flooded the net, reposted a billion times across the sectors. Earth said nothing for 2 years, now they speak in victories. The Council called an emergency assembly, not in the grand halls of Valerian. Those were too exposed now, but deep underground, hidden in a fortified bunker built for planetary extinction-level events. They were desperate. We must retaliate with full force, growled the Velm minister. We have the weapons, we have the numbers. They cannot stand against the united power of the entire Council. No, hissed the Salari diplomat, strike now and we risk full extinction. You saw what they did to our fleet. They've been planning this. The Takari envoy spoke. Next voice cold. They didn't react emotionally. They dissected us like predators who already knew how we would panic. Silence followed. Then the Chancellor of the Council, a ceremonial position that hadn't held true power in a century, leaned forward. What do they want? No one answered. Because no one knew. On Leviathan, Keen stood in the command chamber alone for once the battle was over, his officers were resting or running post-battle diagnostics. He stared at a wall-mounted display showing real-time projections of the Council's collapsing structure. Everywhere cracks widened. Worlds once loyal were now requesting Terran embassies. Smugglers had turned into Terran informants. Even some Council races, once arrogant, now whispered about defection because Earth hadn't come to be included. It came to replace. Later that night, Ree stood outside the old ruins of a statue on Iran, the monument to galactic unity. It had been hit by debris during the skirmish. Head of the statue was gone, the base cracked, fitting. He didn't move as Keen approached. You think they've had enough? Keen asked. Ree shook his head. They haven't lost anything yet. Not really. They still think this ends with a treaty. Keen looked up at the orbiting warships. All patient. They'll offer you the crown next. Diplomatic immunity, a council seat. Maybe even a joint command. If they do, Ree said, you know what I'll tell them. Keen nodded. Good. And above them the fleet waited, not for orders, not for mercy, but for the next lie to come from the Council's mouth so Earth could silence that too. The air on Aran Prime tasted different now. Gone was the aroma of open markets and blooming Skyvan trees. Gone were the sounds of Multiesi's chatter and merchant calls. The once glorious capital of the Galactic Council had gone quiet, not from force but from humiliation. Every race, every system under Council rule had watched Earth dismantle a combined fleet without so much as a war cry. No triumphalism, no declarations. Just action, clean, surgical, unforgiving. And now the silence spread like a disease. Even the banners of the council, once glowing on every building, flickered in half-light, unmaintained, unnoticed, in the ruins of the high conclave beneath cracked pillars and half-scorched emblems. The council chancellor stood before his remaining advisors. What few hadn't defected, surrendered, or vanished. This is our final chance, he said. He looked older than his years now, lines etched deep into his bark-colored face, ceremonial robes hanging loose from a frame made thin by stress. We either find a way to bring Earth back to the table, or there won't be a table left. The Velm War Minister grunted, arms folded. And what do you suggest? We offered peace. They denied it. We sent envoys. They sent wreckage. We even tried a limited assault, and they turned our fleet into scrap. They didn't destroy our planets, said the Salari representative quietly. They didn't touch our cities. Not one civilian death. That's not conquest, that's message warfare. Message received, muttered a Takari ambassador hunched over the end of the table. They are no longer negotiating. They're positioning. We're not in talks. We're in their crosshairs. The aide flinched. Still classified, sir. But it's ready. Eyes turned, nervous glances exchanged. Velm leaned forward. You can't be serious. Earth is beyond diplomacy, the Chancellor said, and we cannot survive another loss. Project Shroud is the only contingency we have left deep beneath the capital, behind kilometers of encrypted shielding. Project Shroud came to life. It had been built in secret for over a decade before Earth even joined the Council, a weapon not of firepower but of memory. It was never meant to destroy humanity, it was meant to erase them. Biopsychic warfare, initiative engineered from forbidden Rothmind tech and Salari. Memory-weaving AI, if deployed it could infiltrate localized human neural networks, wiping cultural identity, language structures, emotional memories, even the concept of Earth itself from the minds of everyone infected. A total cultural annihilation. No violence, no blood, just forgetting. On Leviathan, Keen reviewed the latest intelligence. Ree stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Project Shroud, Keen muttered, staring at the decrypted file. I thought they scrapped this garbage years ago. They did, Ree replied. Publicly, Keen looked up. If they use this, it won't kill us, Ree said, but it'll do something worse. Keen nodded slowly. It'll kill the idea of us. They both knew the stakes. Earth had finally become the force it was always capable of being, feared, respected, unchallenged. But if Shroud worked, all of it could be unwound. History rewritten, identity shattered. No more fear, no more Earth, just silence again, but not the kind Earth chose. This time the silence would be imposed. Ree left the bridge and went to his quarters. He sat in silence for a long time, watching the rotation of the planet beneath them. His mind drifted, not to war but to the past, to Bastion 3, to the sound of children screaming on broken radio signals, to his brother's voice, calm even as the flames closed in, to the Council's ruling, unfortunate tactical mishap, no further action recommended. He thought of all the times Earth asked for justice, then begged, then warned, and still they were treated like animals. Now the same monsters who ignored genocide were trying to rewrite it, to pretend Earth was never there at All aboard a cloaked Terran stealth ship already orbiting the Council's hidden lab. 2 Black Ops agents sat in silence, watching the facility's shield signature spike. "Shroud is live," one said. "We have 30 minutes max before broadcast. No further backup coming." "Nope, they want this deniable." The other nodded. "Then we do it loud." They dropped from orbit like shadows, slipping through defenses with precision Earth had perfected during its quiet years. They weren't soldiers, they were witnesses. The Shroud facility didn't stand a chance. 22 Council scientists, 3 AIs, and a half squad of armed guards, all neutralized in under 5 minutes. The Terran agents located the core drive, removed the memory lattice, and left one message etched into the shattered mainframe: "We don't forget, you don't get to either." Keen received confirmation just as he sat down in his command chair. Ree stood next to him, still watching the stars. "It's done," Keen said. "Good. The Council will deny it," he added. "They always do." Keen looked at him. "You think this is over?" Ree shook his head slowly. "No. Now the Shrouds failed. They only have one option left: open war." Ree nodded. "They'll make it look like Earth started it, claim we violated treaties, painted us as aggressors, unstable, dangerous. They always said we were animals," Keen said with a dry chuckle. "Now they're just giving us a reason to bare teeth." And right on cue, the Council released its final gambit, a full broadcast, every race, every system, every media channel. It began with calm words: "Regrettably, humanity has chosen the path of violence. Despite repeated efforts for peace, Earth has acted with unchecked aggression, attacking fleets, disabling peaceful installations, and refusing all diplomatic outreach." Then came the staged footage: explosions edited for drama, civilian cries dubbed over footage of Terran assaults, fabricated data logs showing false orders from Keen, and the closing statement: "The Galactic Council hereby declares Earth a rogue world. It is no longer recognized as a sovereign civilization. Its technology is subject to seizure, its people to re-education. Effective immediately." The response was immediate, not from Earth, from the colonies, from Mars, where factories halted shipments to Council buyers and raised Terran banners over production yards, from Europa, where mining guilds aligned themselves with Earth and vowed to supply the fleet with every ounce of fuel, armor, and ammunition it needed. From Ganymede, where 500 million colonists sang Earth's anthem in defiance, beaming it across every channel the Council tried to shut down. And from the fringe, those outlaw worlds, long abandoned by the Council, where rogue Terran warbands now openly pledged allegiance to the fleet and began hunting anything wearing a Council badge. Keen stood before the main viewport, watching the stars align. Ree joined him, the silence thick between them. "This was always coming," Keen said. "They thought Earth was a pawn." Ree replied, "They forgot we were born in fire." Keen looked out at the Terran fleet now expanding, more ships, more weapons, more voices, all silent, all waiting. "What's the plan now?" Reyes asked. Keen's eyes didn't leave the void. "We don't take their cities. We don't slaughter their people. That's what they would have done." He turned to Ree. "We erase the Council, not their lives, their power, their lies, their control. And if they resist," Keen gave a grim smile, "then they'll finally understand why Earth went quiet. Across the galaxy, the Final phase had begun, not of war, of reckoning. 1,000 warships, a million soldiers, a planet once mocked, now stood as judge, jury, and executioner. Earth hadn't come to burn the galaxy, it came to make it remember, and soon. Obey. The war never came, not in the way the Council expected. No firebombs falling from Terran ships, no mass invasions of capital worlds, no declaration of dominance, just withdrawal. That was the first sign. Earth's fleet, once coiled around Alarin like a storm waiting to break, began to move, not inward but outward, detaching from orbit like phantoms, dispersing into the black. The Council braced for impact. Instead they got isolation. Earth didn't bomb their cities, it erased their access. Wormholes seeded by Terran engineers collapsed, navigation relays powered by Earth-based processors disabled, artificial gravity stations in neutral zones powered down, cores remotely fried. It was the slow slicing of a galactic jugular, and the Council didn't even feel the blade until they were already bleeding out. Inside the High Council's emergency bunker, panic ruled. What are we seeing? The Chancellor demanded. Mass withdrawal from key systems. Earth's pulling every asset, even ones we depend on, said the aide. Voice tight. We still control the core lanes, snapped Velm's representative. For now, came the Takari strategist, but even our fastest vessels require Earth's field stabilizers to run at full speed. Our economies are built on their tech, our communications, our logistics. He turned, eyes grim. They are not invading us, they are unplugging us. Stood aboard a small Terran transport ship, watching as entire systems went dark behind them. He wasn't smiling. This wasn't victory, this was justice, measured in silence. When the Council burned Bastion 3, Earth didn't cry for revenge, it planned, it watched, it learned how the galaxy worked, and then it built the one weapon no one could stop: dependence. They didn't need to fire first. The Council did that. Earth just needed to wait until they couldn't survive without it. Back on Leviathan, Keen studied the latest data streams. Council revenue from deep space trade had dropped by 81%. Supply shortages in 12 major systems. Over 200 planets reporting outages in core services once managed through Terran infrastructure. They weren't starving yet, but they were about to choke. Commander Walsh entered, face grim. Sir, new intelligence confirms it. The Council is breaking apart. Sources: Velm has officially withdrawn from joint leadership. Takari fleets are refusing Council deployment orders. Salary: industrial hubs are rioting. Apparently, they didn't know how much of their power grid ran on Earth-patented resonance tech. Keen didn't look surprised. They never read the fine print. The second signal came on a cold morning. Over Europa, a short broadcast. Encrypted, marked with a Terran seal. Opened it alone in his quarters. It simply read: Phase 2 authorized. Political disintegration. Proceed with Operation Vault. Didn't even blink. He just stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out into the corridor. Operation Vault had one objective: truth. For decades the Council operated in shadows, cover-ups classified, directives, black ops buried beneath ceremonial lies. Operation Vault cracked those open like bones. Thousands of Terran agents activated across the galaxy, quietly releasing evidence. Caches, video logs, intercepted comms, meeting transcripts, everything. The Council had hidden the bombing of the Martian supply colonies in 2167. Deliberate the blockade on Ganymede that starved 14,000 civilians. Negotiated with full Takari support the cover-up of experimental testing on human prisoners during the Tormic Wars. Signed off by 12 council members, and Earth didn't comment, didn't editorialize, it just released it raw. Let the galaxy see what it had served. All these years, let the truth do that. Burning on the fringe world of Deliri. Entire city centers rioted, burning. Council offices to the ground after viewing footage of a high-ranking Roth general laughing about Terran colonists being useful biological fertilizer. On the neutral trade hub of Vascal, prime merchants tore down council banners and raised white flags with Earth's insignia, not as conquered people but as survivors asking for shelter. Even among the Salari the most loyal to the council, fractures formed. One high-ranking governor broadcast his defection live. They told us Earth was savage, primitive, dangerous, but the savagery came from behind a golden podium wearing velvet robes. Earth didn't lie to us, it just stopped listening. In the council bunker, the chancellor stared at the flickering map of council-controlled space. Nearly half the lights were gone, either under revolt, disconnected, or allied. Now with Earth, he turned to the last remaining representatives. This is not war, he said, voice hollow. It's unmaking. The Velm diplomat leaned forward. Then, we must end it before there's nothing left. How? Asked the Salari. The Velm's face was stone. We go to Earth. Word traveled fast. The final delegation, 3 council envoys, requesting direct talks, no conditions, no pretext, just one request: we are ready to listen. It was the first time in a century those words had come from the council. On Earth they weren't received in a palace or a war room. They were flown to reclaimed bunker in old Geneva, formerly a museum, now converted into a quiet meeting chamber with no armed guards, no flags, no media. Just a room. Keen sat at the table. Reese beside him. The 3 council envoys entered slowly, old robes empty. Eyes, we're not here to beg, the Vel began. We're here because everything we ruled is gone, the Solari added. The Takari said nothing, just stared at the floor. Keen didn't move. What do you want? A cease to hostilities. The Velm said, restoration of cooperation, protection for the remaining systems. You've made your point. The council acknowledges your dominance. No, Re said. They looked at him. You still don't get it, he continued. This was never about dominance. He leaned forward, voice flat. This was about memory, about consequences, about paying for everything you erased. You thought Earth wanted a throne. He laughed once. We wanted closure. The room went still. Keen finally spoke. We're not accepting your surrender. The envoys tensed because there's nothing left to surrender. The council's finished. Burn your robes. Go home. Try to be useful to your people for once. He stood. One final warning. Any attempt to rebuild this council, even in secret, will be treated as a hostile act. Earth will not respond with diplomacy next time. He turned his back on them. Didn't. He watched their faces as the weight settled. The Takari finally spoke softly. What will you call yourselves when this is over? Paused, then said quietly, something you'll never forget. Earth's warships stayed in orbit for Only 7 more days, then they left. Not out of weakness, but because there was nothing left to watch. The galaxy had been broken open, not with lasers, but with truth and silence and patience, sharpened into steel. And now Earth ruled nothing, yet everyone listened, because now when Earth spoke, it didn't ask, it simply said, "We remember," and the stars remembered too. They called it the Silence Doctrine. Not officially, not in Earth's public files or encrypted military transmissions. It was a phrase whispered among Terran officers, agents, and diplomats. A phrase born in the long, heavy days after the Council fell. The Silence Doctrine, it meant we don't rule, we don't rebuild, we disappear and let the galaxy feel the void. But silence isn't just absent, it's pressure, and Earth's silence now had weight for every system that rebelled against the Council. Earth was the gravity keeping it from spinning into chaos. For every border planet trying to stand alone, Earth was the quiet eye watching from orbit. They didn't call for war anymore, they called for guidance, and that was the beginning of the next danger. On Leviathan, Re stood in the observation bay, arms folded as the stars passed beyond the shielded glass. He hadn't slept in 30 hours. The reports came in too fast. Planet after planet requesting Earth's oversight, not occupation, not annexation, just leadership. Terran peacekeepers, trade enforcement teams, security monitoring. It sounded diplomatic, cooperative, even noble. But Reese knew the truth. Influence wears a quiet crown. Commander Walsh stepped beside him, holding a data pad. 36 new petitions in the last 4 hours. That includes a formal offer from the Salari home world. Re glanced at him. Salari, they want Earth to oversee elections, help rebuild confidence after the Council's collapse. Re sighed. Let me guess, military escort included. Suggested. Not required, but they'll push for it. Re looked out the window again. That's how it starts. First we keep the peace, then we protect infrastructure. Then we're writing their constitution. Walsh frowned. Isn't that better than letting warlords take over? Re said nothing, because that was the trap. Earth never wanted to rule, but the galaxy didn't care what Earth wanted. It only cared who could hold the line. In Geneva, Keen sat alone at a table made of reclaimed steel, harvested from the first warship to fall during the Tormic invasion, a symbol of beginnings. He didn't look like an admiral now, civilian clothes, quiet eyes, his scar less visible under the softer lighting. A young woman entered. Agent LRA, one of the few operatives cleared for Earth's inner diplomatic channels. She placed a chip on the table. King raised an eyebrow. Another crisis? Not yet, but it's coming. What is it? A proposal drafted by 13 systems. They want to formalize Earth's oversight of galactic trade and transit. They're calling it a stabilization framework. It's thorough. Keen didn't touch the chip, and if we say no, they'll form their own alliance. But without Earth's tech or arbitration, it'll collapse into infighting within months, maybe weeks. Keen leaned back, silent. LRA hesitated, then asked what no one else dared. If they're going to rebuild something, shouldn't we be the ones to shape it? Keen looked up at her. That's how tyrants start, or founders. He didn't answer because she wasn't wrong. Re met with the first delegation on Delari, a planet that had once housed a council tribunal, now reduced to rubble and politics. The locals greeted him like a savior. He hated it. He sat across from 12 planetary representatives, each more desperate than the last. Most had already begun flying Terran flags above their capital domes, not because Earth demanded it, but because no one else could stop them from burning. The head speaker, a silver-skinned woman named Iriel, leaned forward. "We've kept peace here. Trade, food, water, power, all stable. But only because of Earth's presence. You may not want to lead, Commander, but right now you're the center of gravity for the entire spiral arm." Ree narrowed his eyes. "We're not a new council. You don't have to be a wall. We just need something solid to lean against, and when we say no, then every pirate, radical and black flag fleet will carve us into pieces." He didn't respond because deep down he'd already heard this story a dozen times, and it always ended the same way. Earth stepped in and the galaxy leaned harder. Back on Earth, the pressure reached a boiling point. Civilian leaders wanted neutrality, military brass wanted dominance, the colonies demanded protection, and the outer world's law abandoned now pleaded for Terran recognition, not as pawns but as equals. Under Terran protection, Keen chaired the first Terran Global Council meeting in decades. 12 representatives, all from Earth or the colonies, all with opinions. "Do we rebuild a new order?" asked one. "No," said another. "We let the galaxy bleed until it learns why it needed us in the first place." Keen watched the arguments unfold, and for the first time in his long, scar-ridden life, he saw something worse than war coming: control and the hunger for it. Ree returned to Leviathan. Weary, he found Keen waiting in the strategy room, standing over a new star map, not military zones, influence charts, Terran support levels, planetary allegiance shifts, trade route dependencies. "How many?" Ree asked. Keen didn't look up. 217 systems, now functionally dependent on Terran oversight. Jesus, more than the Council ever had at its height. Ree walked closer. "They're pushing for something. You can feel it." Keen nodded. "There's a movement growing. Civilians, colonists, fringe worlders. They want formal unity, a common currency, shared laws, security guaranteed by Earth." Ree blinked. "You're saying they want to be ruled?" "No." Keen said, "They want to belong to something that won't abandon them." Ree rubbed his jaw. "And the worst part is we might be the only ones who can give them that." 2 days later, the first Terran accords were signed, not treaties, not demands, just agreements, voluntary, transparent planetary systems agreeing to uphold basic trade ethics, anti-slavery laws, resource sharing policies, all under Earth's neutral observation. The rules were simple: no forced tribute, no Terran military presence without invitation, no planet could claim dominion over another. But one line stood out most: Earth will never govern the stars, but we will guard them. And if you betray that trust, our silence will end. Ree stood on the bridge again, watching the warships drift like sentinels through the void. He thought about his brother, about the Council's lies, about the blood Earth spilled just to be heard, and now he thought about what came next, because influence grows like roots, and even silent trees can crush stone if left unchecked. He didn't want to be a king. He didn't want Earth to wear a crown, but maybe, just maybe, being a wall was enough, not to conquer, but to protect what should never be silenced. Again, in the dark corners of the galaxy, rumors stirred that Earth now held the greatest fleet, that Earth could speak and whole systems would obey. That Earth once mocked had become the quiet empire in everything but name. But back on Earth in the same room where we once met with the final council delegation, Keen sat alone. No crown, no throne, just a blank slate of stars on his screen and a message he'd written but never sent. We didn't come to rule you, we came to make sure no one else ever would. The stars had gone quiet again, but this silence was different, not the trembling hush of a galaxy holding its breath under Earth's guns, and not the smug, dismissive quiet that once greeted Earth's desperate pleas during council meeting. This was a listening silence. Across the systems, from the silver farms of Europa to the industrial shipyards of Velmer, people paused when Earth spoke, but Earth didn't speak. Often it didn't need to. That was the final lesson. After all the wreckage, all the dead, all the broken treaties, and hollow apologies, humanity had finally learned how to wield its power the way it had always been denied. Without needing permission, Ree stood on the deck of the Leviathan, now in low orbit above Earth itself. The planet below glowed like it had the day he left it, blue oceans, brown soil, and scattered ribbons of artificial light that hummed faintly across continents, like veins carrying new life home. But it no longer belonged to Earth alone. Thousands of Terran aligned vessels now moved freely across its skies, refugees, diplomats, traders, survivors of shattered systems who had chosen alignment with the very planet they once mocked as savage, loud, and unfit for galactic responsibility. He wasn't angry anymore, not even tired, just aware of what they'd done and what it cost. Inside the Leviathan's war room, Keen stood facing a wall of requests. It wasn't battle data anymore. It was administration, arbitration requests from systems with overlapping mining claims, diplomatic breakdowns between two allied moons near the Salari Belt, a fringe world asking for permission to adopt Earth's education protocols. It looked harmless, almost noble, until you stepped back and realized this was how empires were born, not with a bang, but with a to-do list. Walsh entered quietly, setting a fresh report on the table. Keen didn't ask what it was, he already knew. Let me guess, he said, another planet asking us to enforce their treaties. Walsh smirked, grim and dry. Yep. This time it's two Takari breakaways fighting over a relic planet. They both want Earth to mediate and enforce the result. Keen didn't look up. And if we say no, they'll go to war, and if we say yes, they'll go quiet and wait for us to fix everything. Keen nodded, then said more to himself than Walsh. This is how kings are built, not by force but by being the last ones willing to do the hard thing. Ree stood alone later that evening down in the ship's long-forgotten observation corridor, once used by cadets and rookies. It had dust on the railings. Good, he liked it that way. He pulled the old hollow chip from his pocket. Scorched, cracked, nearly unreadable. His brother's last message. He hadn't watched it in years. He almost didn't press play, but this time he did. The hollow flared up, just a face, a man in a dusty uniform holding a child in one arm, pointing up at the sky. They say Earth isn't invited to the next council vote, the man said, voice calm. Can you believe that, after what we did for them in the war, after the blood we spilled, after how many of our people are buried under foreign stars? He looked at the child, then back at the camera. Tell them it's fine, let them vote. Without us, but make sure when we show up again, they remember what it cost to shut us out. The image cut. The next day, Earth released its final message to the galaxy. It wasn't a speech, it wasn't a threat, it wasn't even sent in standard language. It was a record, a clean, uncut archive of the entire Terran timeline since first contact with the Council. Every failure, every appeal, every denial, every betrayal, then every act of retribution. All of it sent across every major broadcast channel, no commentary, no emotional manipulation, just evidence. And one final caption. History belongs to those who keep the receipts. It broke the galaxy, not in rage, not in violence, but in shame. Entire civilizations wept as they watched old recordings of council diplomats dismissing desperate human envoys. Young students across Velm colonies rewrote their history books in real time. Monuments to peaceful galactic unity were torn down and replaced with blank plinths left intentionally empty to remember what happens when you silence truth. And on planets where Earth had never stepped foot, people whispered a new phrase, let us not forget them again. But Earth didn't gloat, it didn't demand tribute, it didn't name a ruler or build a palace or raise a banner over the stars. It simply turned inward, focused on healing, on rebuilding, on remembering. And perhaps that was the most terrifying thing of all, because power not claimed is never truly lost. It just waits, and everyone knew now if the galaxy ever tried to forget Earth again, it would rise without sound and the stars would fall in silence. Keen retired 6 months later. No ceremony, no parade. He didn't want one. He returned to an old outpost on the Mars frontier, where he'd fought in the last ground war of his life and lost his first command. He lived quietly, tended a garden, watched the ships pass in low orbit, sometimes revisited him, not for politics, not for strategy, just for company. One evening they sat on the cliffside above the red dunes, watching the sun fall low behind the rocks. You ever think we went too far? Reese asked. Keen didn't answer right away. Sometimes, he said, but then I remember. Bastion 3, nodded slowly. They never gave us justice. No, Keen said. They gave us duty, and we carried it. Whether we wanted it or not. He tossed a stone down the hill. Now they listen. Not because they fear us, but because they fear losing what we made them. Remember, leaned back, letting the silence stretch, and for once it felt peaceful. Back in orbit, Leviathan became a monument. Not decommissioned, not rearmed, just preserved. A warship, with its weapons locked, its engines dormant, floating silently above Earth, as if watching, a reminder not of conquest but of cost. Years passed, children grew up never knowing what the Council was. They only heard stories of the time Earth was ignored, of the silence that followed, and of the 1,000 warships that came, not to conquer but to say, you forgot us once, never again.